Sometimes when I run some meetings online, people ask me, well, Natalia, it's obvious that you practice what you preach because you look great. But I'll tell you, it all started for me because my health was in terrible shape ever since I can remember, since I was a child. I was very weak, I was constantly sick, and forgive me for such a detail, maybe it's a bit intimate, but I had problems with bowel movements ever since I can remember. But as an adult, I started to analyze where all my problems came from. I remembered this later because I'm not sure if it was just my family those times or if other families were the same. We just didn't talk about these things. My mom didn't ask, and I was too embarrassed to bring it up or ask if it was normal. There was a problem, and that was it. So as a child, what could I do about it? But I had terrible migraines. And when I went to the doctor as a child with migraines that lasted several days, the doctor didn't ask me about bowel movements either. He just gave me medication. After those medications, I developed terrible allergies because it was quincke's edema, a very serious condition if anyone knows about medicine. But since I still had migraines, I switched to a different medication. I didn't know what was happening, but then psoriasis appeared. Then thyroid problems started. My body just fell apart, and I was just a teenager. My idea to go into medicine, to even get interested in it at all, was connected to the fact that I needed to look for some help for myself. But I wasn't looking in natural medicine because I kept going with my mom from one doctor to another. So you have to find a solution in medicine. And that's how it started. I went into medicine. At first, I decided that I would go into nursing and then become a surgeon. That was my dream. However, when I was already in nursing, my condition was getting worse and I wasn't able to stand for a long time. After 15 minutes of standing, everything would go dark. I felt unwell and I had to sit down. No one knew why. All the tests came back normal. Now I know, and I'm really surprised that no one was able to diagnose it. Because when I look at my photos from that time, I had hyperthyroidism. It was clearly visible. There was a goiter, there was eye bulging, I was very thin, I had terrible anemia, and they just didn't see it. So what could I do? I quit my studies. Because what kind of surgeon will stand at the operating table, if you have to sit down on a chair because you're feeling sick? And that's why I only became a nurse and went to work. And imagine having so many problems, I didn't even take any action. I think that now I see and sometimes understand my clients that they let it get to this point only because they don't know there's another way out. When the doctor says, well, there's nothing we can do about it, that's just how you are, you'll have to live with it. After all, others live like that too. And that's how it was for me. When did I start looking for a solution? When our little daughter started getting sick, and it started with her having constipation, she was born already constipated, which is not normal. Babies are born with loose stools. We couldn't find the cause. And again, I kept banging my head against medicine because that's how I was taught, also in nursing school. That there are medicines, procedures until the moment when the doctors gave up and said they didn't know. That's just how she is. We struggled with the problem for 5 years, and at some point, after another medication, my child's hair just started falling out in handfuls. I tried different supplements, different herbs that I brought. Not tried, I brought them to the doctor and asked her, "Doctor, what about this?" Or, "Someone said this." And I kept hearing, "Supplements don't cure anything." And herbs? Ma'am, with problems like these, herbs? And after that last medication, when her hair started falling out, I was so desperate that I said goodbye to the doctor. We had a bit of an argument, you could say quietly, because I slammed the door and left when she told me, "You have to choose, either your intestines or your hair." So when someone gives me such an ultimatum and you realize, at least as a sensible person, that hair falling out isn't just a cosmetic issue, it's a serious disorder. These medications are causing changes in the body in addition to what's happening in the intestines. And I'll tell you, herbs saved us, herbs that we started using with my child, herbs that, well, those same herbs. Suddenly, it turned out that after 3 days, 5 years of constipation, after 3 days, my child started having bowel movements. My husband and I were really surprised, and we thought maybe it was just a coincidence. Would it really last? We continued the treatment for a month, and we never had to go back to it again. The problem was solved. I just don't know what happened in my mind. It was like a revolution. How is that even possible? So many medications and nothing worked, but the herbs did. And now I understand it didn't work before because there were so many medications, so many chemicals, so many disrupted processes instead of addressing the cause. Today I know what was happening. Today I know that my child, I don't know why, but had a problem with bile flow. That's why I now know that we needed to cleanse the liver, cleanse the gallbladder, and the stool would normalize. When I started analyzing later, I turned to natural medicine. I started learning, I started delving deeper, and I began to analyze where all my problems came from, where the thyroid issues came from, where the psoriasis came from. Well, after all, these are all autoimmune diseases, and autoimmune diseases are related to the intestines. And my intestines, well, I remembered, oh my goodness, ever since I can remember, I had constipation. What was happening in those intestines? And that's when I started to cleanse myself. Starting with the fact that you need to regenerate your body, get rid of constipation, cleanse your body of parasites, and cleanse your intestines. And that resulted in me getting rid of all those ailments, which I was also told were just the way I am and that I would have to live with them. But it turns out you can actually get rid of them. And that's why in my approach, I also start treatment with cleansing the body. And I believe that very often I see that when a person does the right body cleansing, there's no need for the so-called main treatment, because the problem just disappears. That's how it was for me. That's how it was for my child. And that's how it is for many of my clients. And that's why, for example, in my education, I put a strong emphasis on detox. And here, if I may, I'll promote my book, Why Detox? I'll show you what it's like. It's 530 pages. And to additionally answer Adam's question, who asked whether I also meant parasite cleansing when talking about detox? Yes, because I approach detox holistically, including cleansing the liver, intestines, kidneys, and lymph. Deworming, of course, but in general, I consider that to be the next stage because this is how I look at body detox. First, stop poisoning yourself. That's the first pillar. Because what's the point of constantly detoxing if we're adding more toxins than the effects of our detox? That's why first we need to identify where these toxic substances are. We need to educate ourselves about this and eliminate them from our environment as much as possible. I know, let's not go crazy, we won't be able to eliminate everything. And these toxic substances will be around us because we don't live in a sterile environment. But still, we have influence, we can purify the air, we can use ionizers, we can purify water, we can decide what kind of food we choose, we have control over that. That's why in my book I also write that the first step is to stop poisoning ourselves. Where are these toxins and how should we cleanse them? A person also needs to understand a bit more that there are toxins that are water soluble and those that are fat soluble, and each will have a different mechanism for being removed from our body. That's why it shouldn't be like, oh, let's just do some cleansing treatment because someone mentioned it online on YouTube or whatever social media, a cool week-long cleanse, so I'll just try it. No, you need to approach this with common sense. These treatments are different, and honestly, a week-long cleanse, a juice cleanse, a 2-day cleanse, these are just small things that can, of course, bring some benefit to the body. If you stop poisoning yourself, if you stop and give yourself a break, that's great. At least your body gets a moment to rest, but that's not what a full detox is all about. And every treatment needs to be tailored to you, to what your body needs at the moment. That's why I take such a holistic approach to this. We don't poison ourselves, we cleanse the body of the toxins we've identified, we strengthen our body, and most importantly, we restore its abilities. Because yes, very often we can hear discussions online saying that we already have our detox organs, so why help them? Of course we have them, but progress in technology and industry has advanced so much that our bodies can't adapt to the huge amount of chemicals out there, and we have to support our bodies. We also have to remember that in the past, there was less pollution, but there were more active, nutritious vitamin and mineral compounds that we consumed. Now we get fewer positive nutrients from food, but we take in much more chemicals. That's why our bodies are so heavily burdened. And that's why in our everyday lives, as we take steps toward health and a healthy lifestyle, detox has to be a part of it. And it consists of all these elements of a conscious approach to environmental pollution and cleansing our bodies, so that we can see how it affects us and how to get out of all this. That's why if anyone is interested in a holistic approach, I encourage you, dear ones, nataliasamarets.pl is my website, and there you will find a description of the book as well as free excerpts to get familiar with it. And you'll also find reviews from people who have already read it. So I encourage you, thank you very much.